All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Today is As the Crow Flies for Blackbirders Week, and we will be discussing the paths paved and relationships different cultures across the diaspora have with birds and how that has shaped your birding journey. So, this entire day is about birding and bird culture across the African diaspora, and we have some great guests here to lead one of those conversations. So I'm going to introduce my co-host, Sheridan. Sheridan is the owner of Beanie Jean LLC and an environmental educator with a recently completed master's of natural resources in parks, recreation, and tourism management from the University of Georgia. Her fieldwork has taken her across the American South and led to work with PBS Nature, Oboe's Footwear, and others to enhance the minority experience within the outdoors. Sheridan's focus includes citizen science, involvement. Sheridan's focus includes citizen science, youth involvement, and the benefits of ecotherapy. She has a review of Owls of the Eastern Ice that came out in August 2021 in Birding. Sheridan, what are the birds at the top of your life list?
I think right now, Chelsea, the top bird on my lifer list might be the bird mascot for this year's Black Birders Week, which is black heron. I think they have such a cool mechanism of fishing, and I just would love to witness that. And thank you for the introduction.
Yeah,
So
anytime.
yeah, so my co-host Chelsea Connor, growing up in the Caribbean was a constantly formative experience for Chelsea as she got to see and learn a wide range of unique biodiversity. She especially felt a connection with the birds and lizards on her own island of Dominica. Currently a graduate student, her love of nature has taken her on a journey she never expected. And above it all, she is focused on sharing that with others. She has a forthcoming review of Flights of Passage in the June 2022 birding issue. And Chelsea, what is on the top of your lifer list?
Well, I would have to say that any bird of paradise is at the top of my lifer list. I have loved them for so long. I remember reading about them in the library when I was in primary school. I need to see them. Also, I've added the black heron as well.
Yes. Alrighty. So
So let's go ahead and introduce our guests. First, we have Sharon Denise Scott. Sharon was born in Thomas County, Georgia, and lives in Tallahassee, Florida, with her husband. She enjoys writing, birding, and traveling. Sharon was a program chair of the former Tri State Avian Society and worked with the public on the care of exotic species. She gained extensive knowledge of parrots and birds of prey during her tenure. She has a forthcoming feature article on osprey migration to appear in the August 22 birding edition. Sharon, what birds are at the top of your lifer list?
So thank you so much for that information about me. As you have stated, I did a lot of work with Tri-State Avian Society, basically. So I would have to say canaries, because I've also kept a lot of exotic species. I've kept everything from a cockatiel to lovebirds to mustache parakeets, but the canaries would definitely be my passion. And also the peregrine falcon, which is a bird of prey, and also a Mississippi kite. I had the opportunity to see this bird when I put on a program for one of our monthly meetings for Tri-State Avian Society. I brought in Sandy Beck, who works here in Tallahassee. She's a wildlife rehabilitator, basically. So she brought the bird and she had some mealworms. So we all got a chance to basically encounter this bird. And it was just a wonderful experience. But I have had hands-on with the red cockaded woodpecker. I've held the bird in my hand because I wrote an article on the red cockaded woodpecker and their ecosystems with the longleaf pine. So I'm kind of just all over the place. Growing up in Thomasville, I spent a lot of time in the country. And being in the country, you had the opportunity to see Cooper's hawks, and I just developed the beauty that was in me. And truthfully, when we look at birds and avians, we see it in our environment. It's just basically going to be, do we have that person that's going to encourage us to take it farther?
Lovely. Thank you, Sharon. So our next panelist here is Scott V. Edwards. He is a professor of organismic and evolutionary biology at Harvard University and curator of ornithology, and Alexander Agassiz Professor of Zoology at the Museum of Comparative Zoology. Scott teaches ornithology and evolutionary biology, and he enjoys introducing his students to the wonders of birds in the field, in museum collections, and in the classroom. He has a review of the Peterson Reference Guide to Bird Behavior that came out in the May 2021 birding issue. And Scott, what is your at the top of your lifer list currently?
Wow, that's a tough question. Thank you for that nice introduction. Uh, let's see. I would love to see some of the less familiar warblers we have here in the U.S. Things like mourning warbler or Connecticut warbler or Swainson's warbler. These are things that I just have not had a chance to see, and so I suppose those are on my life list. Yeah.
I love a good warbler. That's a really good list. Our next panelist is Alex Troutman. Alex Troutman is a fish and wildlife biologist and environmental educator with a passion for sharing and immersing the younger generation into nature. He has a bachelor's degree from Georgia Southern University and a master's degree in conservation biology from GSU as well. Knowing what it feels like to not see anybody who looks like you doing the things you enjoy, Alex makes it a point to be that representation for the younger generation. Alex is one of the co-organizers for several Black in X weeks, including Black Birders Week, Black Monologists Week, Black in Marine Science. A movement encouraging diversity in nature, celebration of Black individual scientists, and increasing awareness of Black nature enthusiasts and diversity in STEM fields. He has a forthcoming review of Bird Brother and has a review of How Birds Work that was published in the May 2021 issue of Birding. So what is at the top of your lifer list, Alex?
Yes, so there's two birds that are, or a bird and a group of birds that are at the top of my list. So the first bird is the Stellar Jay. I love the colors black and blue. So I really want to go out west and see that bird this year. And then eventually, hopefully in my lifetime, I would love to see some penguins down in Antarctica.
And I hope you get to see them too. Penguins are such amazing birds.
Oh, yes.
Lovely. Well, thank you, panelists. So today's event is titled Blackbirders Embracing the Beauty Thereof. So the following questions are going to be a little expose on how you all have experienced the culture, past, present, and future. And these questions can be answered in any order. Whoever would like to go first. So our first question is, was your childhood shaped by birds or birding in any way, whether that be culturally, outdoor experiences? And how has that translated into adulthood for you?
I can go first. Yes, as I stated, growing up in Thomasville, I spent a lot of time in the country, which is like a place, Patton, Georgia. So being out in the country a lot, you get to see a lot of animals. I would always see the Cooper's hawk, which is indigenous area. I would watch them sometimes as they soar and scoop down and just seeing beauty, like the painted bunting, which is oh my goodness, a gorgeous little bird in the cardinal family. So I would see these birds and I would see them, and I began to, as I grew up, just understanding their ecosystem and how important they are. And then I start thinking that out of all the animals we have fishes who rule the underworld, but avian, there's more birds than there are in any other type of animal, with the exception of fishes, of course. So I said there had to be a reason for this. And so it just, my learning and appreciation just grew, even without anybody encouraging me in that direction. And so I did want to point this out. You don't really, we look at birds and we think, well, there's no one out there that looks like me, basically. So where do I fit in? And even when I was a member of Tri-State Avian Society, I was the only woman of color in that group. It was a lot of older Europeans, basically, but I never did. And I worked with that organization for many, many years. We traveled together. We put on bird fairs. Oh, it was beautiful. But I never looked at myself as being any different from them. And of course, there was sometimes people would come up to me and question me, well, how did you get involved in this? Where did your passion come from? And so basically, to be honest, it's in all of us. It's just up to that individual person as to whether we're going to embrace it or not. And that's my answer to that.
Definitely. That's a very good point there at the end. Alex, I saw you.
Yes, for me, I kind of always had a connection with nature. My family used to go fishing a lot. If we weren't at a sporting event, we were fishing. And for me, like that's where I actually saw my first like spark bird, the red tail hawk. Many times while we were
Oh,
fishing, I would see the red tail hawk like flying over, and then like
yep.
I would get a glare of the sun through the actual red tail. And
Yep.
then other times, like while we were fishing, there would be great blue herons. They'll be like right across from us catching fish while I'm over here just looking at my bobbler doing nothing. You're catching a lot of fish. So those what are two birds that kind of got me into birding. But it wasn't actually until college where I actually started studying and really looking at birds. Like I always had an appreciation, but I never actually went out looking for them until I took a ornithology class in undergrad. That's when I kind of made the decision to actually start actively looking for birds instead of like passively enjoying them.
That's really great. I'll chime in a bit. Um, it's so exciting to hear your stories and Alex's story about taking ornithology. I know that's always a transformative experience. I grew up in Riverdale, New York. It's part of the Bronx, but it actually had quite a bit of trees back in the 70s and 80s when I was growing up there. And in college, I was kind of my dad was a doctor, and I was sort of like, well, guess I'll become a doctor. But then I at some point I just sort of said, well, I should really do what I love to do. And I'd been birding since my youth, really since I was probably 11 or 12 years old. And at some point I just said, well, I want to make this a career. And so and I'm lucky. I feel lucky that I embraced what I was interested in, because that's the best way, I think, to be happy and feel satisfied. And now I'm able to teach ornithology and do research on birds, and that's super exciting because I get to turn on young folks to the amazing things that birds do. So it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
These are all great answers. And I definitely relates to what a lot of you said, that, you just kind of had that connection already. You just like you felt it, because that's like Sheridan mentioned earlier in my introduction, that's how it was for me too. I would just be like running around and like, what is this? What is that? I have so many questions. But also on my island, we have a lot of folklore that revolves around the animals, including birds. And that is something that has always helped connect me as well, and something that I try to look up a lot. Our next question actually relates to land use. So we're wondering, like, how has the culture of land use where you grew up shaped how you currently use it? And anyone can go first.
Well, I, I know everybody's familiar with the cotton fields. Seeing cotton in out in Georgia, when you're going out there in the fall and you start seeing these bulbs and you look at the beautiful cotton, it's almost impossible to see anyone that cannot appreciate the land and how the farmers till the land, and you see just how it all comes together. Thomasville is a it's a very rural area. We have an abundance of all sorts of beautiful oak trees there. Matter of fact, we got one like it's a big oak, and it's just like the tree is so big it's crossing the street. So I grew up. My grandfather used to own a lot of land. He had like, and he would work the field, and he had people working for him. So I grew up seeing a lot of that, seeing him how they would plant all the vegetables, the sweet potatoes, and then you start seeing how it all connects, and how we can take the resources to grow the vegetables, and then we even see how we can incorporate that with the birds and how they take advantage of even the cardinals, the berries, and all of that. So the land in Thomas County is just an abundance, and it all just from looking at it when I was a little girl, and as I would grow older, I would just see, I would say to myself, this is where I want to retire at, because when you have all that land, you get to see just the beauty of it and how it all connects.
Scott?
Um, so you wanted to know about like our connection with the land and how.
Yeah, so how, like, when you were growing up, the way that you saw the land being used, the way that you were taught to use it, how's that shaped how you currently use it?
Right,
Is there a big departure from that? Do you keep
right,
the same
right,
general?
right. I mean, I always was aware of the need for conservation of natural habitats, and New York City was an interesting place and still is an interesting place. It's a big urban center, but there's a surprising number of birds there, and that's it was a really exciting place to grow up bird watching. And I used to take the subway 2 hours to Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge, which is a big wildlife refuge in Queens. And I'd pass through lots of different neighborhoods, and at the end, I'd just be in this real paradise for birds. So my experience growing up birding, it was more of an urban experience, but I kind of focused on those parts of the city that were green and that had lots of wildlife. And where I grew up was right near the Hudson River, and Hudson River, of course, is a big migratory flyway. So lots of spring migrants and fall migrants, raptors, warblers, vireos, and it's definitely shaped me because I still enjoy the outdoors, and I really think that conservation of biodiversity is important for us today. So.
My experience is also coming from an urban area. I grew up in Atlanta and Metro Atlanta, and Atlanta is actually nicknamed the city in the woods or the forested city
Mhm.
for all the green space and trees we have around us. So many of my time was spent traveling to areas like Piedmont Park or our local state parks, Sweetwater Creek, Red Top Mountain, that gave me access to not only fishing opportunities, but also birds, being able to see red-tailed hawks, ospreys, and even some of the local birds that a lot of people do not think as, I guess, so glamorous. There's like everyday birds like the northern mockingbird, northern cardinal, and
Mhm.
then some of the sparrows, even some that are introduced like house sparrows. So I grew up seeing those birds, which are still very important to my life. And it was pretty cool to see how the land in the urban areas is still very profitable and filled with birds. As I went down to college in a more rural area, and seeing how how the birds change from the city, but also still seeing some of the same birds are still in the rural areas as well as the urban areas. It kind of made an impression on me. And then, like, for my experience, I actually um, started out going into looking at birds and land use and switching from a pre-vet degree into a degree where I can be a wildlife biologist, and knowing that I want to actually help conserve these areas for the birds and other species. It's kind of what like drove me to being a wildlife biologist, and I want like other generations to be able to see this beautiful areas that we have, including the birds and other animals that inhabit these areas.
No,
Yeah,
I was gonna say I love that point Scott and Alex both made about like urban birds, and just proves the diversity and the resilience and the tenacity that they have.
yeah. And I think once you get used to seeing something, you kind of start to discount it. I'm
Mhm.
not from here, so when I moved here and I saw my first robin, that was like a big, exciting
Like, oh,
experience for me. Like a
yes,
robin, I've only seen them on TV. So it's just
exactly.
looking at it from a different perspective can definitely help a lot.
Yes. And similar to introducing, birds to children, like they think northern cardinals are the greatest thing since sliced bread, and they are. But it's always fun to see others see those birds for the first time. Which kind of leads into our next question. So, what is one generational impact or understanding that you all would like to see passed down from your current birding experiences?
For me, I like to see pass down that birding in nature is for everyone. Um, there's a lot of sayings like black people don't do this, or like I'm afraid to do this because I'm black. But like in actuality, black people do a lot of things. Some of the first actual like national park protectors and overseers were the Buffalo Soldiers. So we have had a huge like history of being in national parks, being in nature as Black individuals. So I wanted to change that preconceived notion that Black people are not into the outdoors and we don't do nature, because we do it and we are actually doing it very well. So I just want continue um, passion for Black people to be in nature and have a love for birds.
And Alex, I'm glad that you brought that up. That's one thing. Cultural, I call it, it's a term I use, and I call it cultural bondage. Cultural bondage is when, as you stated, you look at yourself basically and you separate yourself. It's not people doing it to you basically, but you pull yourself away because your culture, you think in your own mind that my culture doesn't do this, but they culture do it. This culture does it, but it's not for me. So that's kind of the mindset and how we even get into even having this conversation for the most part, because we look at the beautiful birds and we see what everybody else see, and we're no different from anybody else. We're all human. Birds, they're birds, we're humans, and we appreciate their beauty. That's why I sent the title People of Color Embracing the Beauty Thereof. But there's been so many misconceptions, and a lot of it is just passed down from one generation to the next generation, and nobody's there to basically explain to their children, no, this is for everybody. Everybody can go to the Grand Canyon, everybody can go to Yellowstone. We don't have to do these things. And I had a conversation about this, what we're talking about, and he was a man of color, and he said it. He say it's not that they're doing it. He say they separate themselves because they think that's just something they do. So if we can look at ourselves as individuals, and that's how I look at Sharon. I don't define myself by a culture. I define myself as who I really am. And because I don't do that, then I don't have constraints, and I can embrace anything that I feel like I want to embrace. And I don't have to worry about what people are going to say or feel about me.
I think that's a really good point, and I would love to see, yeah, just like you guys have been saying, I'd love to see more people of color just embracing the outdoors, getting outdoors, enjoying birding. And, the fact is, when we're birding with other folks, I mean, often we're, the only one in that
Yeah.
group, right? We're the only Black person, the only person of color. And, often in lots of parts of this country, you mentioned the Grand Canyon, Sharon. Well, there's a there's not many African Americans in uh, some parts of the country, and so, but some of the most beautiful parts of the country, I would say. And so, we need to figure out how to navigate those spaces where we're really not very present in the communities there. Um, but just like Alex was saying, we actually Black folks have a very, very strong history of exploring this country. I think, for example, of Esteban, who is this African who accompanied Coronado on his expedition across the US back in the 1500s. And I think about York. York was the slave, that went on the Lewis and Clark expedition that walked all the way from, and canoed all the way from St. Louis to the West Coast. So, Black folks, they're explorers, they're out there. And so I think we have to remind ourselves that we have a very proud history of exploration in this country and enjoying the outdoors and nature. And we have to keep that going. So.
Yeah, thank you so much for those amazing answers. Sheridan, did you have anything to add?
My only addition, I always say Black people are the originators of outdoors. So anytime someone feels as though they don't belong or quote unquote, we don't do that, we
Mhm.
are the originals of doing
Yes.
that, quote unquote. So yes.
Yeah. And on my island, it's very common for people to just go take a walk, hang out by the river on the weekend. That is just like a normal thing that we do.
Yeah.
Extending it into like, like studying animals is not as common, but like being outside and being connected with nature is definitely a really big thing. And seeing the juxtaposition of the culture there and the culture here has definitely been very interesting for me. And I hope that it can change. Alex?
Yeah, I would like to add that, like, the way that many Black people experience nature, like you said, it's not always exploration or working with wildlife. Sometimes it's for us, it's just sitting on the front porch and in a like swing chair and just watching cars pass by or watching kids play in the yard. But other times it can be at local parks that we have having like many of us like don't really have like the land that other of our counterparts have. So we congregate around local parks and have our cookouts and barbecues there. And that's one way that we can connect with nature, but also family. And sometimes, a lot of times, it's incorporated around music and food. So there's not really one way to connect with nature, but you can connect through many ways. And we as Black people have been doing that for many different years and generations. So we shouldn't limit ourselves to saying I only connect with nature when I'm out hiking or I'm actually working with some type of species. But if you're sitting on the porch watching the birds, you're connecting with nature. If you're at a family picnic and function in a park, that's still a way to connect with nature. So we shouldn't limit it to like, oh, I have to go out far to do nature. You can do nature anywhere. And sometimes we're limited of doing nature or exploring nature because, like so I said, a lot of the national parks are out west or they're not on like transportation routes. So that's a limiting factor. But if we can connect nature to nature in our own way, through local parks, through gathering with friends, that's one way that we can help sustain this um, Black exploration, Black connection with nature.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's a really, really good point. My family gardens, so we have like fruit and vegetable gardens. Our family friends have like similar gardens as well, so that's a way of connecting with nature. And my grandmother, when I was in primary school and a little bit through high school, she would feed the birds that would come to her yard. She particularly had to feed this one species, or they would steal the sugar themselves. But but she fed them, and that was her like connecting with nature. And those are things that made really big impacts on me.
And also, too, I wanted to add to what Alex has said. I think a lot of times people, when people look at nature, people, what was that song called? This land is your land, this land is my land. People, I don't care where you live. You mentioned Atlanta. Atlanta is just, it's so much to see in Atlanta. I don't care where you go, even if you're in Meigs, Georgia, those are small unincorporated area. What people think of nature, a lot of people think, okay, well, I don't live by the Grand Canyon, so I can't afford to travel there, or I can't go to you make it be about money. But anytime you go outside, you're in nature, and it's everywhere. It's in every state that we see nature. It's not that if you go to the park, a lot of people think that when people of color go to the park, the only thing that they're going to the park for is going to be a barbecue. But there's all kind of things to do at the park. It's just how we have been conditioned to look at things. You don't have to have money. I'm in Tallahassee, Florida right now. And you know what I have here? I just found out about it. We have an Indian mounds right down the street from me because I love to walk, and I try to find places that I can walk to get away where I know, I like to be by myself a lot. So nobody's, pretty safe area for me. And then I'm out walking. I find these places on my own. Nobody tells me about these things. I just found out about this. In Tallahassee, this little college town is full of remote places where we can see all kind of birds. And as he mentioned, the red-tailed hawk, birds of prey, raptors, they're coming inland now because they're looking for food. I just saw a red tail driving down Tennessee Street. I looked up and there was a red tail. So it's all around us. We just don't need to complicate it.
Yes, thank you so much for highlighting those really important points. I'm gonna let Scott um go.
I was just going to quick add to that. I think it's really important that Black folks just get into all aspects of birding, not only just for recreation, that's super important, but I would love to see more Black folks actually think of birding as a career. I can tell you, as an academic studying birds, there are not many people of color in my field. And I've spent a lot of my career trying to get more people of color to, think about making birds or environmental science a career. That might mean getting a master's degree or maybe even a PhD. But I want people to know that it can be done. You can do it if that's what you want to do. There are lots of opportunities. You don't need money to do it. They'll pay you to do it. And get in touch with me if you want to study birds, because there's a lot of opportunities, and I think people of color have a lot to contribute to ornithology in general.
Yeah, we definitely do. And having a lot of different people at a table gives you lots of different points of view, because we all have different strengths, we all have different weaknesses, and we all have like grown up differently. So our experiences definitely shape how we view something and what it means to us. So having those voices at the table is also really important.
Definitely. I think you all gave some really amazing stories, and we kind of got a look into the different sides of culture and how Black people interact with the outdoors, how Black people interact with birds. So, lastly, we just want to allow all of you to kind of plug yourselves, whatever you would like to tell the people, promote, where they can find you. So, yeah, any one of those things. Scott, would you like to go first?
Well, I just want to say again, I'm a huge fan of Black Birds Week, and I joined Twitter basically to be in touch with Black Birds Week. I mean,
Yay.
I don't think I'd be on Twitter if it weren't for Black Birds Week, because it's a great way to meet new young folks doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And yeah, I think it's super important, this message. It's really important to get outdoors and just do what makes you happy. Get out there, observe birds. Don't let the dominant culture tell you what you want to be. And if you want to make birds a career, that's possible too. There's all kinds of doors open. And thank you for putting this on. It's super exciting. Yeah.
And thank you so much for being a part of this panel.
Wonderful. Sharon?
Oh, I'm a member of the Audubon here in Tallahassee. Once I left, we closed down Tri-State Avian. I've been a member of Audubon. So we do a lot here. We haven't been doing a lot for the last 3 years, but we have group meetings. We go out to Wakulla. We have the Butterfly Monarch Day. We get together. I love to go to the meetings to hear speakers, learning about different species. Actually, here in Tallahassee, we put on a program here, I think, about a couple of years ago, where we brought in children and we took them to Lake Alberta, and we was showing them different aspects of birding, what they can do, showing them how birds take seeds, how they disperse seeds. We had a lot of flowers there. So we do a lot of things here in Tallahassee. And the Audubon Society, I really love the Audubon. I would encourage everybody to, if they have an Audubon in the area, you can always tap in to get a lot of information. Wildlife agencies, like I said, we have St. Francis Wildlife here. We have Sandy Beck, who is I get these newsletters. They're always rescuing eagles. The spring migration, they feed the birds. You can go, you can volunteer. So it's just a lot of information out there. And as Scott said, this also can be looked at as a career, because there is a lot of people lacking in ornithology they have talked about.
Lovely. And Alex?
Yes. So I'm Alex. You can reach me on Twitter and Instagram at nature_al, and that's nature N8TURE_AL. And yeah, I'm a fish and wildlife biologist, and I'm always open. My inbox is always open for anybody that wants to connect, talk about birds or any other wildlife. Even just being Black in nature, my inbox is open. And yeah, I'm looking forward to continue weeks of Black Birders Week, and engaging the next generation of Black scientists, Black outdoor enthusiasts.
Awesome. I'll go ahead and do my own, and then Chelsea can close us out. You all can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all the things, on at Beanie Jean, or you can just search my name. It's also fine. But yeah, just out here promoting Black people outdoors and Black people in birding, specifically through mental health. And I would love to connect with anybody that would be interested in that.
And you can find me on Twitter at Chelsea Herps. You can also look up my Redbubble at that name. I am an artist and I design a lot of stickers. You will find that they are lizard based because I am technically academically a herpetologist. But I do still love birds, and birds are like technically reptiles, so it works out. You can find me on Instagram at out to Chelsea. Unfortunately, it's not the same. I'm so sorry. I have two different handles. And I have a link tree on both of my social media profiles, so you can just easily look for any other thing that I'm on. Before we close out, I just want to give a big thank you to the American Birding Association and Frank for hosting this panel and inviting us. Thank you so much. Thanks, guys.